evening, everyone. Great crowd. Welcome. My name is Alana Bruton. I'm the Public Programs Manager at the Chicago History Museum. And welcome to Civic Talks, Chicago Blues. This series is designed to bring people together in order to connect Chicago history with stories from today. Tonight, we'll learn about the blues through sharing of Chicago stories and listening to music played by legendary musician Billy Branch. Along with Amplified Chicago Blues exhibition curator Joy Bivens, we will explore the blues past, present, and future. I hope that many of you were able to check out the exhibition upstairs. If you want to have more time with it, please come back on our Tuesday nights. We're open late till 9 p.m., and we're also free for Illinois residents. So it's a great time to come back and check out our blues exhibition and check out the museum itself. It is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Russell Lewis. Russell Lewis is Executive VP and Chief Historian at the Chicago History Museum. He's responsible for the day-to-day implementation of the Chicago's museum's mission to creatively explore and showcase Chicago's history and culture, and to preserve, manage, build, and make accessible to the public the museum's collection of more than 22 million documents and artifacts. He's also a lifelong fan of the Chicago Blues, and he performs with Frozen Ground, a local blues band. Russell and panelists can join me on stage.
Wow. Well, good evening, everyone. Ready for some blues? All right. We got it for you. So we have a really unique kind of program for you tonight because we've got a scholar and a curator who knows a lot about the blues, and we have one of the legendary blues performers around with us. So we're going to have a great, really, I think, insightful conversation. And Billy's going to play a couple tunes for us, too. So I think it's going to be a really nice evening. So Joy Bivens, as you heard, is our Director of Cultural Affairs here at the History Museum and one of my dearest and most valued colleagues. And, of course, we have the legendary Billy Branch here. Probably today the hardest working man in show business.
I don't know about all that.
He's been performing for over 4 decades, so that's got to be some kind of record. I mean, that's a tribute to you.
I'm glad to be here.
So we're going to start out with a couple of questions here for both Billy and for Joy. So as a blues scholar and as a blues artist, why do people today love the Chicago blues? Joy, why don't you go first?
You want me to go first? Okay. So I have a couple of answers for that, or a couple of musings, I think. One, I think because it's great music, the sound itself. Also, I think the specificity of the music is one of the reasons that people love it. And the music is also a great way to connect with the heritage of the city. And so I think all of those things together are reasons that the blues is still, Chicago blues is still relevant to people today.
Billy.
Well, contrary to a lot of misbeliefs, it's fun.
Yeah.
And it, I think it echoes the spirit of this city. When you come to Chicago, the blues is like the soundtrack of everything that that's surrounding you. And it's not hard to understand. It's simple, and there's a certain level of freedom associated with the blues. Like when we do performances, see people just having the times of their lives, dancing or just sitting there, tapping their feet. There's a lot of freedom with the blues.
All right, great. So, Billy, this is a question for you. You have performed Chicago blues all over the world. Outside of Chicago, where we know the greatest Chicago blues fans are, who's next? Who's next in line?
In terms of artists? Or?
No, in terms of fans. Where have you found the greatest appreciation, outpouring of fans for the blues?
Personally, I found when I perform in Latin America, South America, Mexico, also Japan, I have experienced some of the most enthusiastic responses. I mean, it's almost, you feel like, I want to stop saying, short of saying like a feeling of worship almost, but they just are just so appreciative, genuinely appreciative and so enthusiastic.
Okay, and where are you going next? Are you going anywhere?
Well,
perform around the world?
We were in China about a little bit over 3 months ago, and we're planning to go back in September. Scheduled to be in Italy and in the UK. We were in Ecuador last year, and we traveled to some of the Afro-Ecuadorian communities, which was really interesting, and we did some musical exchanges. But again, because of the universality of the blues, it was easy to meld these genres, different genres of music.
Okay. So this is a kind of, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a tough question, but I feel like it's important and timely. So given that the blues lyrics often sexualize women, sometimes they can even be misogynistic, why would women today, who are increasingly speaking out about sexual harassment and the like, why would they be attracted to blues? What message does it have for them? Joy, let's start with you.
Yeah, I saw that question beforehand, and I had to think a little bit. As a person who grew up listening to hip hop, and listen, I would think that I would argue that much of the lyrics in the blues is quite tame compared to what I used to listen to as a young person. And I also think that when you talk about any aspect of culture, music being one of those things, that you can't separate what is being said in music from the general direction of the culture. And so the sexualization of women, misogyny, these are things that are alive and well within our larger culture. And ultimately, because of that, that gets reflected in some of the music that people produce. But I wouldn't limit that to blues lyrics at all. As a matter of fact, I would argue that many of the lyrics are more about love and relationships and the struggle, the struggles between men and women or within intimate relationships, and not necessarily about misogyny and or sexualization. But ultimately, when you are in a culture where that is quite the norm, that may seep into some of the musical forms.
Mm-hmm. Billy?
Well, I read that question before as well, and I was kind of hard-pressed to think about any misogynistic lyrics, because most of them, of course, a lot of the themes are about either wrongdoing man or wrongdoing woman, but there's a lot of them that talk about heartbreak and a love for a woman, unrequited love, or take a Little Walter's "You So Fine" or "My Babe Don't Stand No Cheating," or so. Again, I think the blues is the music that universally speaks to the human condition, you know, on both sides of the sexual aisle.
That was good. So here's a question for you, Billy. Sons of Blues has been performing for over 40 years with you. The band has changed over those 4 decades, but today it's a diverse group of musicians. So how did the band evolve, and what does that diversity sort of mean today?
Well, originally, the original members were all sons of famous blues musicians, except for myself, the son of Willie Dixon, the son of Carrie Bell, and the son of Clifton James, who was Willie Dixon's drummer and Bo Diddley's original drummer. And our very first performance was at the Berlin Jazz Festival, where we were part of a 15-piece aggregation, and we were the answer to are there any young black people playing blues, and it was a huge success. And for the audience, you can see that performance on YouTube, accompanied by Willie Dixon, who acted as the master of ceremonies. But over the years, there's been change. Lurie Bell left the band, and there were various guitar players, Carl Weathersby, Carlos Johnson, and many of these former members went on to have become band leaders in their own groups. But our mission pretty much remained the same, and that was to be true to the traditional Chicago blues sound, or as I put it sometimes, I say with a foot in the past and an eye to the future. We always had a contemporary edge. And I just give you an example. Back in the 80s, we were playing probably between 82 and the late 80s or up to the 90s, we're probably playing over a dozen clubs on the south side of Chicago that weren't blues lounges. They were neighborhood clubs that in essence we kind of baptized. We met resistance. We go into these clubs and the black folks would look at us like, oh no. But in a month, we'd walk in and say, y'all gonna play the blues? So we kind of, because we were young and we were dynamic, they couldn't deny it. Yeah.
And what about the diverse makeup today?
Well, it's reflective of the audience. It's reflective of the world. In our travels in China, I was playing with a Chinese blues band. When I go to Mexico, I'm playing with a Mexican blues band. In Poland, the same. And in all of these cases, they are very capable and very good musicians. They've done their homework.
All right, good. So, Joy.
Yes.
The exhibition upstairs, which I hope everybody had a chance to see. And if you didn't, go see it. And if you did, come back.
I just want to interject. I said, this is fantastic. I'm so happy and congratulations. It's a wonderful exhibit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So Joy, actually, I saw a friend who came and saw the exhibition, and I said, how'd you like it? They said it was great. She said, one of the things I liked is the way they profiled some of these blues performers. So the first performer, musician that you profiled is Little Walter.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about Little Walter and
Sure.
his why he's got this prominent role in the exhibition.
Well, Little Walter has a prominent role in the exhibition because ultimately he's one of those musicians who helped to define what Chicago blues sound is with his amplified harmonica and the ways in which he really, in so many ways, kind of shifted the sound of that instrument, gave it prominence within the blues band. And also, all of our artists, in a lot of ways, are highlighting one of the major themes of the exhibition, which is the Great Migration, and that this music came with those Southern Black migrants. If you notice, none of the artists that we spotlighted were born here in Chicago. They all came from someplace else and brought those musical traditions with them. And then I think also Little Walter, in his short life, because he died at 37, but was ultimately a prodigy, shaped in the Muddy Waters band and becoming his own solo, popular solo artist himself, I think is really indicative of how the blues came to be, or how the Chicago blues sound came to be after the Second World War. So we wanted to highlight him, and if you notice that the image we use isn't one of him with his harp, but it's with the guitar on Maxwell Street. So in a lot of ways, that confluence between the importance of Maxwell Street and then also the importance of Little Walter to shaping this sound is something that we wanted to highlight very early on in the exhibition. And I don't know that you can overstate his importance to shaping what Chicago blues is, how it's characterized. So he's a really critical artist that we wanted to feature.
So Billy, you have played with so many great Chicago blues musicians in your life, but it seems like you return again and again to Little Walter for that inspiration and for that sound. Can you talk a bit about why he's such an important part of your music?
Well, again, Little Walter's significance and importance can't be overstated because I didn't get a chance to hear him or see him in person, but I learned personally from his peers and from the guys that were influenced by him, notably Carrie Bell, Junior Wells, James Cotton, and Big Walter Horton. I spent a lot of time with those gentlemen, as well as a assortment of other great harmonica players. But to a man, they will tell you that if they said who was the greatest, they all would say, hands down, Little Walter. He utilized, by amplifying the harmonica, taking that mic and cupping it to the harmonica and then overdriving it in a cheap amplifier or a cheap microphone. He effectively used feedback as a recording and playing enhancement device. So when you listen to Little Walter records, you cannot identify that instrument as a harmonica. In fact, there's stories of when he came out with juke, and some of it, some jazz guys are standing around the jukebox debating what instrument is this, because it sounds nothing like a harmonica.
So I think you're going to treat us to some juke right now, aren't you?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And this is Dan Corelli, who just celebrated his birthday yesterday. So this is, I'll do my best to Little Walter's Juke, which was a million seller, and actually I think it was number 1 or number 2 on the R&B charts. And
Number 1.
Number 1.
Yep.
1950.
52, I think.
52? All right. Ready? 1, 2, 1, Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Wow.
Okay. Take a little break and just sit back and answer a few
All
more
right.
questions. So this is for both Joy and Billy. What kind of exposure to the blues did you have growing up, Joy, in Chicago, and Billy first in Chicago and then in Los Angeles? Joy.
So I did not grow up listening to the blues at all. Though I am a Chicago native, I was raised primarily in the church. And my music was what my parents listened to, which was gospel music, when we listened to music at all. However, I think one of the things that I've recognized, not just from this project, but from learning more about the blues, is that oftentimes we're listening to the blues and we're not aware that we're listening to the blues because it so informs all of the musical styles that we're hearing. So whether that was, as I said, gospel, basically I was listening to churched up blues. I didn't know that at the time, but once I understood that, I recognized that there was always exposure, and even when I was listening to hip hop and house and all of these kinds of things as a young person, I later recognized the blues as the root and foundation of so many of the different styles of music I listened to. But I would say very limited exposure until my parents kind of loosened some of the reins and they started to talk about their experiences listening to the blues as youth in the South, and then having an opportunity to visit some of the clubs here in the city, the Checkerboard. I played violin, and one of my instructors introduced me to the blues scale and said, use this, it'll save your life in a pinch, if you need to do something innovative even with this instrument. So I think I was listening to the blues or exposed to it all the time, but not in an explicit way as I was growing up here in Chicago.
Billy?
Well, I was born here, and you mentioned Los Angeles. Family who was mother and father were both Chicago natives. We moved to LA when I was about 5. And I was typical black teenager. I don't want to hear that stuff. I knew zero about the blues. Then I returned here to attend University of Illinois, Chicago Circle campus, and before my classes started, I saw an ad in a paper about a free music festival. I found out later the date was August 30th, 1969, where I was witness to the greatest blues festival ever produced in history. And I'll name a few of the artists. Coco Taylor, Buddy Guy, Junior Wells, Bo Diddley, Muddy Waters, Betty Everett, Willie Dixon, and about Big Walter Horton was on it. Did I say Junior Wells? Yeah. There were about 30 or 40 legendary names. And Willie Dixon produced this festival with Murphy Dunn, the son of the old ex-Mayor Daley's political about George Dunn. And I think this was an effort, the 68 Democratic, the riot convention, right? And this was an effort to kind of save face. We're going to give a free festival. And so they gave this wonderful festival backed by Willie Dixon chose the artists, and his band, the Chicago Blues All-Stars, were the rhythm section for all these artists. And I had somehow taught myself to play harmonica as a youngster from age 11. And by the time I came back to Chicago, I still had a harmonica. And to show you what an effect August 30th, 1969 had on me, the very first time I ever heard live blues, 7 years later, I was Willie Dixon's harmonica player.
Oh, wow. So we have that poster in the exhibition,
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
So, what attracted you to the harmonica in the first place as an 11-year-old?
That is one of those mystical. It made no sense. To the best of my recollection, I walked into a Woolworths. My mother was an avid bowler, and I'd be bugging her, "Mom, give me some money. I want to play the game." "Here, boy." And she gave me some money, and I walked next door to a Woolworths, and looked in the glass case, and there was this shiny harmonica in a box. And I
Rosebud.
And it wasn't the blues style harmonica. It was called, I had to research this, but it was called Valencia. It was a double layered folk harmonica. But a little voice said, "I can play that." And I'd never heard anyone play one. I never saw anyone play one. I asked the clerk how much it was. It was $1. I had $1, bought it, and as soon as I put it in my mouth, I could play practically any folk melody I could think of. It was really weird. And I kept that. When that one would wear out, I'd go back, buy another one, and until that day of August 30th, 1960, it's like it prepared me for that day. I don't.
Remarkable story. I like the mystical moment there. That's really great. So you mentioned a couple of artists, Junior Wells and James Cotton and Big Walter Horton. How did these great blues artists, how did they teach you, and how did they have such a major influence on you?
Basically, they taught me by beating me up on stage. Or there's an album that I appear on called Harp Attack. It's kind of iconic record now on Alligator with myself, James Cotton, Junior Wells, and Carrie Bell. Big Walter had passed, or he probably would have been on that record. But I ended up going to Teresa's, I think, first, which was Junior Wells' home base. And then ultimately all the other clubs at the time, the Pepper's Lounge was relocated to 13th and Michigan, and then ultimately to 24th and Cottage, where Max Simmons owned it. And there was the Queen Bee Lounge and Florence's, and there was quite a few clubs. Eddie Shaw still had 1815 Club. I would occasionally go over to the west side. There was a handful of clubs. But I'd come around these guys, and I was just drawn to them so much with this desire to get better on this instrument. And these guys were the best exponents alive at that time. And eventually I found myself on stage with them. And in Junior Wells' biography, in his filmography, they ask him, what about Billy Branch? And he kind of sums it up. He says, yeah, we used to make Billy Branch eat that harmonica. So I wrote an autobiographical song called New Kid on the Block, and we're talking about that and kind of joking about it on the record. Yeah. But I just kept coming back for more.
Yeah. So the blues is something that is, it's got great legacy. It's got great traditions that are important for us to cherish. You said, Billy, we've got to kind of keep one eye on the past and one eye on the future. So what do we want to preserve from the blues of the past, and how do we take that to go forward?
You want me or Joy?
Joy?
Well, I think something that Billy is talking about pretty intensely is this intergenerational exchange that you had, this mentorship that you had with these elder musicians. And I think that kind of communication is something that is critical to preserve from the legacy of the blues. I also think that the participatory nature of it, the freedom that you were talking about in expression, is something also that we need to keep an eye on and take with us into the future. And also, I just think the blues as a significant part of not only Chicago's legacy, but African American cultural production is so important because, as I mentioned, oftentimes you're not even aware of how the music you listen to as a student or as a young person is informed by these traditions that your foremothers and forefathers laid before you. And so I think that knowledge is really critical, that resiliency, that self-expression, all of those things are so important to preserve from the legacy of the blues.
Billy?
I'm sorry, can you restate that for me again?
Well, just the blues has, there's such a legacy, so many traditions. It's inform it, but as you said, it's good to kind of keep one eye on the past and one eye on the future. So how do we do that? What are the traditions and the legacies that are worth preserving as we try to have a blues for 21st century?
When I was with Willie Dixon, who I look at as not only as a former band leader or employer, but as a mentor. And it was through Willie, because Willie was, he wasn't your typical blues artist. He wasn't just a guy that got on stage and sang his songs and then walked off. He lived, breathed, and preached the blues constantly. And I think a lot of my passion came from Willie's, the association with Willie Dixon, because Willie, he made the connection that the blues was the essence of African American culture. And this is something that's been lost. This is why I see a lot of the youth and a lot of the misdirection that we see now is because of the lack of that cultural cement. And the blues is like that diamond in the rough. It's so easy to dismiss it. It's so easy to overlook it. Ah, man, who wants to hear that old stuff? I lost my woman. I don't want to hear that, But it's much richer and deeper than that. And I think especially in these times, it's essential that we redirect our focus. And also in light of, frankly, some of the music that we're hearing now, come on. Come on, man. Come on. You know, the blues, look, it spawned everything, you know, and it, especially I'm sure a lot of blues fans out there, you know that Rolling Stones took the name of their group from a song by Muddy Waters. I mean, Elvis Presley's, all the rock groups, Led Zeppelin, most of the famous rock bands started out as being blues cover bands, but yet it is not really known to the general population at large, certainly not to some of the younger generation. And so I think that the spotlight needs to be directed towards the blues and embraced and included, so that we don't just hear the blues at late night radio we guys are getting off our gigs, you know, so, you know, yeah.
Well, we'd like to put the spotlight on you and Dan one more time.
Okay. All right. Okay. We were going to do all Little Walter, but I think I'm going to try to change this up a little bit. And and I see we have we have a celebrity in the house. We have the Little Walter's daughter, Marion Diaz, in the house. Yeah. Okay, so now I guess I got to do a Little Walter song, huh? All right, we go back to let's do That's All Right. E, yeah. You told me, baby, once upon a time, you said I'd be yours, and you sure would be mine, but that's all right. I know you don't love me no more, little woman, but that's all right. But every now and then I wonder who's loving you tonight. When I love you, baby, you just didn't understand. I woke up that next morning, found out you had another doggone man, but that's all right. I know you don't love me no more, little baby, but that's all right. But every now and then I wonder who's loving you tonight. Can you play a little bit, Dan? You tell me, babe, that your love was strong. I woke up that next morning, all your big bad words was gone, but that's all right. I know you don't love me no more, little woman, but that's all right. But every now and then I wonder who's loving you tonight. Thank you, Dan Corelli.
Thank you. So we're going to do a couple more questions.
Okay.
This is the question I really have been waiting to ask you, Billy.
Okay.
Because I think your song, Going to See Miss Jerry Once Again, is such a remarkable piece of music. I mean, if you
Thank
all
you.
haven't heard it, you got to listen to it. It's
Thank
great.
you.
And
Thank you.
as you say, she was a Chicago treasure. And we feel very proud and honored that we have some of Jerry's items here at the
Yes.
museum. And, she deserves that kind of recognition. But this song talks about Jerry, and it talks about the Great Migration and the challenges and the obstacles that black folks who came to Chicago face. It's one of the few blues songs that I know that really directly addresses this history. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it's so remarkable. Can you tell us a bit about how you came to write that song and what Jerry meant to you?
Well, for those who aren't aware, Jerry's Palm Tavern was the fixture. Yeah, Jerry's Palm Tavern, fixture in Brownsville, in the South Side, the black community. It was, by all accounts, the place to be seen in its heyday. And it was acquired by Jerry Oliver from a numbers kingpin by the name of Jim Knight. This is all well documented. I'm not telling any secrets or anything, but and so I happened to meet Jerry, I think, in the late 70s. Now, by this time, the Palm Tavern had been a neighborhood bar that a lot of the locals and some notables would still frequent. Jerry told me that before Jesse Jackson had a locale for Operation Breadbasket, he held his meetings there. And so she was connected with a lot of very influential and notable people in the community. And a buddy of mine who, Harmonica Hines, we're riding down 47th Street, and we never noticed it before, and first thing we noticed, it was a sign that said Nam-myo Horenge Kyo, which was the Buddhist chant. I said, that's kind of odd.
It's upstairs.
You got the sign, yeah. But what really drew us in was the smaller sign in the window that said 4 shots for $1. So, needless to say, we stopped the car and walked in there. So we go in there, and as I recall, there wasn't anyone in there, or maybe 1 or 2 people, or maybe. But here's this very elegant. She just had an air about her, and she had a vibrant aura, And she's, "May I help you, gentlemen?" And we said, "Well, yes. Well, we saw a sign in the window that said 4 shots for $1. would like to know, is that true? She said, why, yes. We said, well, we'll take $2 worth. And so that began the relationship, and I kept coming back. I kept coming back, not just for the shots, but I kept coming back, and we developed a relationship to the point she called me her son. And she would come to my performances, and I would, on occasion, she would have events with bands, but mostly it was still a neighborhood hangout. But during its heyday, every major black and some white entertainers passed through the Palm Tavern. I mentioned them in the song. The song is called Going to See Miss Jerry One More Time. If you don't want to purchase the CD, you can watch it on YouTube. There's a video, Going to See Miss Jerry, that a buddy of mine put together. And I mentioned some of the luminaries, which included people like Billie Holiday, Moms Mabley, Sammy Davis. I mean, you name it. They said whoever would, even Frank Sinatra passed through the town of the Palm Tavern. And then she was shut down. At this point, she had gotten up there in years and was not really fully capable of managing the club by herself. But she was doing it. She was hanging on. She was hanging in there. But then she was shut down due to some political, I don't want to go into that, but it was politics. Shut her down, and there was no fanfare, there was no going away party, there was nothing. And the building was ultimately burned down and destroyed. And I thought, what a travesty that this woman had held this landmark of an institution. For over 50 years she held it. And so I felt really inspired to write this song. And it was in my estimation and my wife's and some people who know me, the best song I've ever written. And it was the hardest song to write because it was a historical narrative as well as an impassioned tribute to a great matriarch of the city of Chicago.
Well, thank you for that gift. It's a great song. Okay, we're going to have one more question, and then we're going to have some Q&A, because I know you're all eager to quiz our panelists up here. So both Joy and Billy, you're both educators, too, in addition to all the other things that you do. And so what are the opportunities you feel that the blues has for young people in terms of teaching them skills, attitudes, values, all those sort of things? Joy.
So I think that music is a wonderful way to educate young people, particularly because it breaks us a little bit out of the mold of traditional curricula. I also feel like biography, particularly of these musicians, is a fantastic way of connecting young people to the past, to people's stories, to the narratives of these men and women who came to Chicago, who tried to make lives for themselves, who used this music to shape those lives and then also to shape their communities. And I also think music provides a really unique lens into thinking about big themes in history. I don't know that we exploit it as well as we should when we're talking about themes like migration or discrimination or even thinking about labor or all of these kind of big ideas that we try to expose students to, and then music becomes another way of telling those stories and a way to mix things up. So I feel like it's a really awesome tool to be able to expose students to. And also, unfortunately, young people don't have the same kind of music educations that many of us were privy to when we were coming through school. And it is not only a break in kind of the testing, the testing cycles that young people or students have to go through, but it's a whole different way of learning, right? There are so many learning styles, and music is one way that some young people learn. And I feel like to use the blues in that way to teach them about to teach students about history, not only of the South, but of the city of Chicago, is a really unique way to just kind of mix things up, if you will.
I have now been teaching blues as of this year, blues in schools for 40 years, since 1978. And I think I'm the longest continual practitioner of blues in school, one of the first, and possibly the only artist that his whole band has been engaged in remote locations. And we've done blues in schools in South America. We've done it all throughout the United States and the UK and Canada. And recently I did at my nephew's second grade class at University of Chicago Lab School, second graders. But the blues is, as I mentioned at the outset, it's fun and it's easy to learn. So typically, when I ask the kids, what gives you the blues? The questions are, my little brother, my teacher, homework. So, okay, I didn't do my homework today. I can't go out and play. AAB, right? You repeat it. I didn't do my homework today. I can't go out and play. I feel so bad, like a ball game on the radio. You can write a blues song so easily. and the kids get it. I am still on Facebook. Occasionally I'll get a message from my very first residency in 1978 at Newberry Elementary School. Mr. Branch, I still have my harmonica, and all of my kids know the blues because of you.
That's awesome.
And on occasion, I do run into former students, and it is a way for them to easily express themselves. I've had many cases. I've got cases where it brings tears to you. Are some of the stories we've had a suicidal young lady that, because of our bass player, our late bass player Nick Charles mentored her, she became a role model for the kids. And even after she went on to college, came back and addressed another group of youngsters. I've had Chattanooga, Tennessee guy, the teachers bet that this young kid wouldn't last one day. He became one of the exceptional students. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, two students that the coordinator tells me at the end of the program said, you had the two worst kids in the class. I said, who? I said, well, she pointed out these two boys. I said, well, they're the only guys that had perfect attendance. and she said, well, that one threatened to kill his mother last year, and this one burned down the principal's office last year. But they were the blues spoke to them. And as a result, their academic level improved, their social skills, everything. And it's because out of all of the musical art forms, the blues, I think, speaks most directly and most plaintively and most clearly to the human condition. Everybody gets the blues. Everybody don't get the hip hop or the jazz. Or the classical, But it's something a feeling that you can transform and express into music. Yeah.
Well, it's great to know under both of your guidance that the blues has this power and is something we can take a lot of civic pride in. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So we're going to open up to some questions and answers now. So we've got a microphone because we are recording this.
Hey, I got one question. I'm a guitar player. I know nothing about harmonica, but I wanted to ask you, how many different keys of harmonica do you play?
Well, the 12 keys, whatever it calls for, you know, you got them in all keys.
How many harmonicas?
On a typical night, I probably go through 4 or 5 keys, but I got to have all 12 because somebody will say, "Hey man, play me a blues in F sharp." So you got to have it.
When you play, you're obviously like kind of singing through the harmonica. Was there ever a point where you listened to a vocalist or a sax player and said, I gotta learn that phrase just like she did it, just like he did it, kind of like taking some other instrument and doing the harmonica version of it?
Probably not consciously so much. Mostly when I was learning exact phrases, it would be from harmonica play. Like for example, juke. That I took the time to learn that. I say I've got that 97% note for note, okay? But mostly, but I do, in my playing, sometimes I am consciously playing horn lines. I'll play horn phrases. And especially because for me, playing background is as important as being a soloist. So I do play horn lines a lot.
And right here in the middle.
I've really appreciated the show and all you've shared with us. And I'm thinking how much you linked the blues to the Great Migration, of course, as does the exhibit. And I think if one could characterize a large displacement of African Americans currently, it would be mass incarceration. So I'm wondering what you know about or how involved you might be with prison-based blues.
Well, personally, at this point, I don't have any direct involvement. On a few occasions, I did some performances at Cook County Jail, but that was over. Wait a minute. let me clarify. But that was several decades ago, and but you're right. That is a very significant issue plaguing the black community, and I mean I don't want to get too deep in it. We all see what's happening on the news right now with the police reaction to especially African American males, and that is a serious issue that really needs to be dealt with.
Right back over here.
Hi, Billy. I was just wondering, the festival, was that in Grant Park at the old, I think...
That was at Grant Park. I think it was at that point the band show was by Roosevelt Road.
It faced the other way, didn't it?
Yeah, right, and it faced south.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was turned on to the blues there too. I just wanted to say that.
Kindred spirit.
Was, in addition to the guys that you mentioned, were there like earlier in the day, like maybe even a lot of older guys from like down south up on stage that, I mean, to a 17-year-old, they were probably all old to me, but I think I do remember the same festival because I remember Bo Diddley, and
Yeah.
he had a hit with can't tell a book by looking at the cover
Right.
at the time.
It
I think it was the same thing.
Yeah.
It was the same festival. Very good time. But
Right
thanks.
on. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. I'm from England, and I just wanted to say firstly thanks, but secondly something about the synergy between communities. You mentioned rock musicians alluding to or being based originally in the blues. Where I come from, that was incredibly significant. You mentioned Led Zeppelin. I grew up in the same town as Jimmy Page. In fact, he went to school with my brother, who was later his technician for many years. And he once said that the blues in the working class white community in Britain saved the lives of American black bluesmen who came over. They said that was the gig. People like, I had a friend who played a guitar with the Reverend Gary Davis, and he said Reverend Gary Davis would say people like him would run the blues circuit through the towns of England, through working men's clubs. So that was the saving gig. That was the real money bringer at a time when the blues was dying on the American market. Do you remember that time as being a very, very thin time, and that you needed to go to places like the UK and Japan just to survive? Because it made a whole new culture for us. You know, it was a rebirth of British rock culture. It was the beginning of the Great British Invasion came from that.
Well, when I first entered the blues scene, was slightly after that, but I heard that, and I've read that by many accounts by Muddy Waters and Wolf and Junior and Buddy. They did openly say that these young Brits were responsible for resurrecting their careers because the blues had fallen off of the airwaves in the United States. You know, rock and roll and the music was changing and the tastes were changing. So yeah.
I got a quick question for you. I've heard Buddy Guy speak movingly about the torch passing from Muddy to him. Who do you see the torch passing to? You know, what young, or middle-aged blues stars are the in the offing?
Okay. Well, there are, we keep having this discussion. Some people say the blues is dying, and it'll never die. But I'm a little optimistic because I'm seeing more African American young artists entering the fray. Kingfish, a young man from Mississippi. You had the Carolina Chocolate Drops a few years back. You had, oh boy, you all can probably name
Gary Clark.
Jemiah, right? Jemiah, On Fire. I mean, there seems to be a momentum happening right now, and again, given the current musical landscape, we something's got to give, and it's my hope that people will embrace and re-embrace and give the blues its due, because I've been 3 times Grammy nominated, right? And we went to the Grammys on the last time I had a nomination, and we watched the show, and frankly, it was like, is that it? And we all said, if they had a good blues band on that stage, they'd blow everybody away. Yeah.
Are you going to take one more question?
Okay. An add-on to what the English gentleman commented just now, and that is what is overlooked in the entire talk about how the blues came back via Europe. It's not only via England to the United States. Is that 2 German promoters, Lippmann and Rau, who are in the Blues Hall of Fame in Memphis, were the ones who brought the guys from Chicago to Germany to both parts of Germany, actually, which is very interesting. They also toured in the GDR, in the German Democratic Republic, behind the Iron Curtain, and to France, and to Holland, and to Denmark, and to England, of course, British Isles. And you mentioned, Billy, next year coming up 50th anniversary. You seem to be celebrating anniversaries every time there's a blues fest. But I think it's very important, and we will be doing an event celebrating we talked about it already, the American Folk and Blues Festival. These were the tours of Lippmann and Rau to Europe in Chicago, commemorating the tours in '69 to Europe. By that, bringing over the guys who were in that, and Wim Wenders, who made a film, Soul Man, or Man of Soul, and so that would be a great event celebrating that moment in history.
Thank you.
All right.
So we're going to ask Billy and Dan to take us out with one more tune.
All right.
Oh,
All right.
okay.
Another shameless plug. Dan is former member of our band, the Sons of Blues, and once again is celebrating his birthday. And he's about to get married. And the Sons of Blues will be headlining at the Chicago Blues Fest June 9th, doing the tribute to Little Walter. And the other participants will be Corky Siegel, Rick Estrin, Magic Dick, and Sugar Blue. Okay. What we gonna do here? What we gonna do, man? Let's do. Okay, I know what we'll do. We practiced this on sound check. We'll do the show that blues songs about women are not misogynistic. We'll do You So Fine. This is a little Walter tune to all the ladies in the house. You So Fine. You so fine, I wanna love you all the time. You so fine, pretty baby, let me love you all the time. Now, well, I got a girl, she's fine and brown. Well, like a body, she might, oh my, she's so fine. Yeah, she's so fine. You are a fine, healthy thing. I wanna love you all the time. Now, well, I give you all my money, buy diamonds, everything. Say you'll be mine, baby, we will make romance. You so fine. Yeah, you so fine. You are a fine, healthy thing. I wanna love you all the time. Baby, just can't help myself. Gone crazy 'cause you're loving someone else. You so fine. Yeah, you so fine. You are a fine, healthy thing. I wanna love you all the time. diamonds, everything. Say you'll be mine, baby. We will make romance. You so fine. Yeah, you so fine. You are fine as the thing. I wanna love you all the time. Thank you. All right. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming, and go out and listen to some blues. All right.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you so
Great,
much.
man.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Good job.